My name is Jennifer Houston McNeel, and I am a New Testament professor at the St. Mary's Ecumenical Institute in Baltimore, Maryland.
Dr. Jennifer Houston McNeel, it's good to see you. This is your first appearance on Exegetically Speaking.
It is.
Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to be talking about John chapter 7 in a few minutes. First, let's find out a little bit more about you. How did you get started reading Greek?
Well, I grew up Lutheran. I'm still Lutheran, actually. And as a young adult, decided to go to seminary. I went to what was at that time called the Lutheran Theological Seminary at Gettysburg in Pennsylvania. It's since merged with another Lutheran seminary and has a different name now. But I didn't really go there to study Greek, but I went there to get a Master of Divinity degree, and Greek was required for that. So that's how I got started on it. For the first semester, we had summer Greek where we did an intensive 2 weeks of Greek before going into the regular Greek class in the fall semester.
You had death by Greek in a way.
That's
you
right.
Studied like crazy, and then you jump into it. And then from there, you went on to do another master's or a PhD after that?
No, I just have the Master of Divinity from that school, and then I went on to PhD at Union Presbyterian Seminary in Richmond, Virginia.
And all along, you're having to really work very closely with the Greek text, I take it.
That's right.
Yeah. And you do in your new book called Under Her Wings. Brilliant book, thanks. Thanks for writing it. It's entitled Under Her Wings, Mothers and Motherhood in the New Testament. We'll be talking about that on our sister podcast, The Stone Chapel, a little bit later on. We're really excited to have you with us here for the first time, and we're going to jump into John chapter 7 here now. Tell me a little bit about what's happening in John chapter 7.
So in John chapter 7, Jesus is in Jerusalem for the festival of the booths or the tabernacles festival. He's been teaching in the temple and causing some controversy. People are listening to him. People are talking about and really arguing about whether or not he could be the Messiah. And this leads to the religious authorities making some plans to arrest him as well. And then on the last day of the festival, Jesus makes this statement that I wanted to talk about today.
Which festival are we talking about here?
Booths or tabernacles.
Yeah, Festival of Booths, Tabernacles. And there's a lot we know about certain things and a lot we don't know about what happens on these festivals. But there are certain things that we can tie into based upon some of the things that we know and the words of Jesus here. So Jesus stands up and says, and this is a pretty audacious statement when you think about it, "If anyone thirsts, let him come to me and drink." Wow.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't stop there, does it?
No, it doesn't.
What else does he say? And tell me a little bit about your own interpretation of that. Yeah.
What I want to do is start with the way that the NRSV translates the passage. This is the updated version of the NRSV. It says, "Let anyone who is thirsty come to me, and let anyone who believes in me drink. As the scripture has said, out of the believer's heart shall flow rivers of living water." There's a lot going on here that makes this passage a little bit challenging to translate and interpret. Three things in particular, I think, three questions that have to be answered to understand this passage. One is, how should the text be punctuated? The second is, how do we translate the Greek word koilia that we find in the passage that the NRSV just translated as heart? But is that really the best translation? And then thirdly, who does this koilia belong to? So the NRSV interprets it as belonging to the believer, but we could also interpret it as belonging to Jesus.
Yeah, because actually what follows that is a singular masculine pronoun, right? Mm-hmm. So it's koilia sautou. They're saying it's believers koilia. Right. And it could well be Jesus' koilia. Well, let's talk first of all about the punctuation. Because that's pretty important. How these things are punctuated does determine, to some degree, how we read those texts.
Yeah, and I would say the punctuation question is directly related to whose koilia is this? So those two questions really go together, so we can kind of talk about both of them at once. I do like to tell my students that punctuation is interpretation. So when they see in their English Bibles the way the text is punctuated, that's one of the layers of interpretation that's already been put on the text by the translators and editors
Yeah.
of the Bible.
Good point. Yeah.
So one way of punctuating the text is to put a period after the verb pineto, to drink, which would result in a translation something like this. And this is similar to the NRSV, but a little different than the way they chose to do it, but essentially the same. If someone is thirsty, let him come to me and drink. And that's where the period goes.
Period. Okay.
Next sentence, the one who believes in me, as the scripture says, out of his Koilia will flow rivers of living water. This punctuation and translation makes the Koilia belong to the one who believes in me, taking that as sort of the subject of the second sentence.
Yeah.
My problem with this is that Jesus has just said in the first sentence that people who are thirsty should come to him, right? Not to the one who believes in him, but come to him. And I think it makes the grammar of the second sentence a bit tricky as well, because we have the one who believes as the subject, but then we also have the rivers of living water are in the nominative as well there. To me, it makes a lot more sense to put that period in a different place so that we have both of those problems actually are solved at once by shifting the period to appear after the word for me in Greek. So in that case, we would translate, if someone is thirsty, let him come to me, and let the one who believes in me drink. And then that's where the period would go. I know I said after me, but in the Greek and English word order are a little different there.
Right.
But if we put it after the me in Greek, then in English it would be a period after let the one who believes in me drink.
So they are to come and they are to believe in Jesus. They are to come to me, and then they are to believe in me. And then, in a sense, that's the metaphorically drinking.
Right. And then the second sentence is, just as the scripture says, out of his Koilia will flow rivers of living water.
Ah, okay. All right. Do you have a sense of what scriptures he's talking about there?
Unfortunately, no. Nobody knows that for sure. Because if we had the scripture, then that would help us with the interpretation of this verse to say, okay, well, what is the Koilia and who does it belong to? If we could look at it in context. But people have scoured the Old Testament and not found that particular quotation.
Yeah.
So different suggestions have been made, but there's nowhere in the Old Testament that has those exact words in it.
Yeah. So the word koilia itself, next best place to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you've got one translation that says koilia is heart, right? And then you've got maybe another koilia is the stomach, in a sense. You've got that as a possibility. And then the idea of the koilia as the womb.
I think what's going on with the heart translation is that, in ancient times, people tended to think of their emotions as having a seat in their guts.
Right.
Whereas in English, we talk about the heart, like the heart is where love is and these kinds of things.
Yeah.
The word koilia in Greek really doesn't mean heart. It means sort of the insides of the abdomen. And so some translations just decide to call that the heart, but really it is the abdomen. Sometimes it's used to mean stomach, like Jesus says, food goes into the koilia and then out of the body. So it's quite clearly stomach there with the association with food. But actually, I would think more often in the New Testament, the word koilia refers clearly to the womb. Mary conceives Jesus in her koilia. The baby in Elizabeth's koilia leaps for joy when Mary comes to visit. Much later, there's a woman who calls out to Jesus, "Blessed is the koilia that bore you, the nurse that fed you." So quite a few times it clearly refers to the womb in the New Testament.
I think it's hard because, we have this idea of biology, in our physical makeup that the ancients didn't have exactly. It just went inside you. And honestly, sometimes when I am upset and emotional, I do feel it in my guts, So they're onto something. They're describing something. So what's the payoff for you? Let me ask this. If we say, instead of out of his koilia will flow rivers of living water, if you say out of his womb, what's the payoff?
Yeah, I think it's pretty big personally. Well, first of all, let me say I said that it often means womb. There's only one other time in the Gospel of John, since that's the gospel we're in. There's only one other time in the Gospel of John that this word is used, and that's in chapter 3 in the conversation with Nicodemus. Jesus tells him you have to be born from above or born again. And Nicodemus says, well, how can a person go back into their mother's Koilia and be born a second time? That's the only other time the word is used in John. So when you see that that's where the word is used in John elsewhere, all of a sudden we have this strong connection between chapter 3 and chapter 7. With the living water also creates a connection to chapter 4 and the conversation with the Samaritan woman.
I
Jesus tells
see,
her that if she's thirsty, right, which is again a theme that we have in chapter 7, the thirst, if she's thirsty, he can provide her with living water that will satisfy her thirst. So that connection to living water in chapter 4, as well as the womb imagery that we get in chapter 3 with Nicodemus, just creates a whole web of connections to Johannine theology between with chapter 7 and the idea of living water flowing out of the womb of Jesus that satisfies the thirst of those who come to him.
And so you have this maternal image then associated with Jesus, right? Which is a lot of what the focus of your book is about. The idea of mothers and motherhood in the New Testament, but also carrying that over into thinking about God and as having maternal interests and maternal functions, as it were, and the kinds of themes that you find there in the Gospel. Not in the Gospels, but in the whole New Testament. It's a really fascinating book, and this is a fascinating reading of this text. So out of his womb, Jesus' womb, will flow rivers of living water. Fascinating. Dr. Jennifer Houston McNeel. Houston, gosh, it's right in your name. You should come and visit us. Come on down to the Lanier Theological Library sometime. We'll invite you. We'd love to see you face to face here. Thank you for being with us today on Exegetically Speaking.
Thank you very much.
You know, that is the very first time that I've ever heard that reading of John chapter 7. Well done, Jennifer. I think you may be onto something, and maybe that's the right way to read the text. Your reading makes more sense to me in light of Jesus' offer to let others come and drink. You know, it's interesting to think that punctuation has such a profound effect on how we read and interpret these texts. All right, here's the bottom line. We need men and women to become uber-competent readers of the New Testament in Greek. How, you say? By going to Wheaton College and learning Greek from John Lansma and other great Wheaton faculty. There's no time like the present. So go to the links in the show notes today. They can guide you to the right places so that you can get enrolled and get involved today. I want to say thanks to our great staff who help us produce this podcast. You know who you are. Until next time, I'm David Capes, and thanks for listening.